Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Welcome into the box seats here on latenightsportsradio.com. Box seats with Alex B. Smith and Bob Sullivan here on latenightsportsradio.com. Alex, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. Getting ready for what is always a very busy Thanksgiving weekend. We got NFL games Thursday, and you got college games Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Of course, NFL back on Sunday and Monday. And then, of course, we got college basketball around the clock, a lot of daytime tournaments. The NHL's in full swing now as well, NBA. So it's just a lot to cover right now. It's always a busy time of year. Plus, you throw in a holiday, on top of all of it. So a lot to cover.
Is what is there any advice you have for people on these? Okay, we obviously every year we get Lions and Cowboys playing on Thanksgiving Day against some random opponent. Sometimes it's Cowboys versus Indians, Cowboys and Redskins. But is there? And then there's one additional game. Is there anything different about betting these games versus your typical Thursday night games that we get during the regular season that are just crap matchups? Is there any difference in betting these than betting those other Thursday night games?
Yeah, absolutely. Because these games, like I said, for the longest time, these were the only Thursday night games. And of course, being, everybody's at home, all the players, know their families are watching. Just a much larger audience. So guys, we've seen some historic performances over the years in some of these Thanksgiving Day games. So yeah, it's definitely a different atmosphere. And you look at a team like Detroit and Dallas, two teams that play this every year. The atmosphere is hyped up that much more depending on how good or how bad that those teams are. I remember for years, when Detroit was really bad, the 0-16 seasons and the countless 3-13 years. It always seemed like no matter what, they were going to get hyped up for this game on Thanksgiving at home. Now you got them in a spot where they're at home laying points for a chance to really, get a stranglehold in the division. Everybody's going to really be fired up. So the crowd is that much more electrified and intensified for these games. So yeah, it's definitely a much different feel than these, ho-hum, mundane, divisional games we've been seeing in the Thursday night spot for the last couple of years.
In Detroit, it's funny, like growing up, I think you're a year older than I am. I'm 26. Mm-hmm. You're 27, right?
Yeah.
Okay. With that, we grew up in an era, where the Lions are just awful.
Yeah.
But, really since like Ndamukong Suh was drafted and Calvin Johnson, Stafford, the Lions, yes, they've had a couple bad years under Jim Schwartz and whatnot, but I feel like it's not so much that it's just a horrible franchise to watch anymore. It's either they're underachieving or, they're at least entertaining. That's been the difference in the last, 5 or 6 years at least, in my opinion, with Detroit. Like, the Detroit game has at least you have something to kind of look forward to in the Detroit game versus watching Dan Orlovsky run out of the back of the end zone or something for a safety. I just... That's been the difference for me with Detroit. I may be wrong, but
no, I agree with you on that. And one thing I do appreciate the NFL doing at these games, I guess it kind of correlates with the rest of the Thursday night games that we've seen for the most part. They're usually, I guess we could fairly say about 85% of the Thursday night games are divisional matchups. And it's nice to see Detroit playing Minnesota, Chicago, Green Bay on these games, Dallas except playing Washington, as opposed to where a few years ago, I was talking about this with somebody the other day about when Detroit, the years they played Tennessee, year they got crushed by New England. Those games weren't as interesting, not only because Detroit was bad, like you mentioned, but because there was no traditional rivalry or any kind of matchup there. The whole point of having Detroit playing this game every year, and I remember people being upset saying, why does Detroit, have this game every year with how bad they are? Well, they've started the tradition of having Thanksgiving football back in the 30s. So we wouldn't have any of these Thursday night games really if it wasn't for the Lions, stepping forward a long time ago and putting these together. So, you got to keep Detroit around, but at the same time, make it more relevant. Even if they're a bad team, you know they're going to get fired up to play the Bears. Which, like I said, growing up, that's what I always remember. Growing up in Chicago, we got up early, cooked early because we were watching the Bears-Lions game every year, and I get that they have to rotate that around but I'm glad that they're keeping it within divisional opponents and opponents that are commonplace to make it for a more interesting game.
With looking into Thursday, is there anything that you in particular that could ruin your Thanksgiving meal? Just looking at these lines.
No, not really. The only thing that really stuck out is a side and total in one of these Thursday games that kind of stuck out with me, and I'll give one of those plays out later in the best bets. But no, I've like I said, a good piece of advice that I think I always give on this show and anywhere else is, because the game's on television, it's a big game, and like I said, everybody's got the day off work, it's sitting at home. That's not a reason to bet this game, or any of these three games or any of the games, coming up during this weekend.
Well, no, but it could be a reason to live bet the game.
Sure. Oh yeah, you have the time to sit.
Attention, don't lay money right away on whatever the line is for these games. If you're sitting there watching intently, or you just want to have some fun with a couple family members, live betting I would advise on this.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. This is the time to live bet. If you're sitting and watching a whole game, a lot of people might have not had time to watch a whole NFL game over the last couple of weeks, or maybe even the whole season, particularly. So this would be a good time to maybe get some live wagers in. And it's not like you're going to see an influx of live wager money come in because of the fact that the situation of weekday game and people at home. It won't affect the line moves. I don't think they're going to be as volatile as any other prime time live action. But definitely something to keep in mind and take advantage of, especially second half. I think it was a couple of years ago I had a second half play on a Thanksgiving game that cashed in. So not just live wagers too.
I think I remember your story. It was the Lions-Texans, wasn't it?
That might have been it. I'd have to go back in my notes and look and see, because I was at a friend's house. I remember I was at a friend's house watching that game. No, it wasn't the Lions game. It was the Dallas game, because it was later in the evening, and I had to go stand out on a snowy balcony to try and get signal to on my cell phone to get that play in. So I think it was a Dallas game maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But yeah, so not only live wagering, but second half wagers as well. And there are a lot of good websites. TeamRankings.com is a great website for second half notes, and I use it for first half notes in the NBA. So that might be something to take a few extra minutes to kind of glance at when handicapping this week.
Okay. All right. Looking at the with the NFL, we've had, this has been a down year, just a bad year for the NFL. Going into these Thanksgiving Day games, we got Pittsburgh, Indianapolis. I mean, we should be thankful for Andrew Luck versus Ben Roethlisberger, but the Colts are just, I hate watching them. Actually, I can't even really say that because I really haven't watched them that much. And Pittsburgh, they are what they are, and it's just not a very entertaining team when Brown, Bell, and Roethlisberger aren't all healthy at the same time. And what do you think the odds are that Ryan Grigson is, during Thanksgiving dinner, is saying that he's thankful to be a GM in the NFL, because that's never going to happen again?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a giant failure that's going to be changed over at some point. And it's odd. I think this might be the biggest line move we've seen for a game in the NFL this year. The soft opener was Pittsburgh -2. And we didn't know what the situation was with Andrew Luck, and now I'm assuming that Luck will not be playing in this game, because the lines now are seeing 9s. I'm seeing some 10s, and maybe the cheapest thing you find offshore would be at 8.5. So that's a huge line swing. I think it's Scott Tolzien is the backup for Indianapolis, if I'm not mistaken. I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine, and he was trying to. He said, "What college did he go to?" And Tolzien was a Wisconsin guy, and didn't really have to do much. He had a lot of great running backs behind him. So how he ended up getting in the NFL and sticking around with a lot of teams as a backup is beyond me. Well, but
It's like any Wisconsin quarterback, really. Like Brooks Bollinger.
Yeah.
How was that guy a starter at any point in the NFL? Like, that guy was considered like the Jets gave him a chance to be their quarterback of the future. That was the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
That's Wisconsin quarterbacks for you. That's Tolzien and Brooks Bollinger, and that's all.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, so that and the thing too is that, you know, like I said, Big Ben, he's playing, but he's not, you know, he's never 100%. So it'll be, you know, like you talk about live wagering opportunities. If something happens where Roethlisberger gets hurt, and we've already seen the total come down too from 53, 52 and a half all the way down to 47 and a half. So this might actually be a game where the only way you would want to wager this game would be live betting, because there's no telling what could happen. Injury on either side of the offense would be, you know, would cause some havoc for anybody who's got a ticket on the side or a total in this game.
Is there anything really else this, you know, I mean, everything is pretty much about Thanksgiving usually this week, and then Sunday's an afterthought. Is there anything really on Sunday that you are looking at, or is this the time to play on Sunday because, you know, everybody's paying attention to Thursday?
Well, no, I mean, there's some spots, you know, we're getting into the home stretch of the season. Obviously, next week we'll you know, be going into December. We're getting into, you know, teams that are out of playoff positioning aren't caring as much. Teams that are jockeying for playoff positioning are going to play with a little more intensity. But there's not a lot. I mean, these lines are really tight now. They've been tight all year, but this is the tightest we're going to see them, unless there's an injury, obviously, because there's so much information that we're all going off of. So now's the time to, you know, not just look at strictly statistics. You got to start looking at situations, travel situations, teams coming off bye weeks, teams whose bye weeks were so long ago that they're starting to get gassed again. Cross-country travel has never really mattered as much in the NFL as it does in college football or other sports, but this is the time of year, and a lot of teams are catching on to staying around in states. We saw Oakland stay around in Florida for 2 weeks. We saw, I want to say it was Miami, or it was another team that stayed in California for a couple of weeks. So teams are getting hip to not traveling back home. It
was Atlanta. Atlanta stayed around Denver when they had Seattle the next week.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So teams are getting hip to not traveling back home, which is eliminating any semblance of a you know, cross country hangover. But still, you want to look at teams that have been playing, you know, 3 road games, you know, over the last 4 weeks, 4 road games over the last 5 weeks, and little spots like that, and motivation, just simple motivation. A team like Cleveland, while I think many of us expect them to go on 16, we might see them get a, you know, they're only 6.5, 7-point underdogs against the Giants this week at home, but we could easily see them catch a ton of points in the last week of the season when you know that their motivation is going to be, hey, we cannot finish without a single, you know, win on our, you know, on our calendar. So there might be some bet on spots for teams. You know, if you're looking at a team like the Bears, for example, decimated with injuries and there's all kinds of chaos going on in the locker room, the team you might want to fade, and, you know, no matter how many points they're getting, obviously you'll have a cutoff of a limit at some point, but you got to understand that the motivation factor with teams that are out of it, it's already built into the line. So
sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying the motivation factor, one way or the other, it's built into the line, but you still have to, you know, that doesn't mean that it's a completely unbettable line because it's built in there. You still have to, like I said, you have to match your numbers up with your motivation and scheduling situations to, you know, come to a conclusion.
What did you make of, on Monday Night Football, the green laser pointer on Brock Osweiler?
You know, it was super cheap. I mean, obviously that you know, you hate seeing that. That's just poor sportsmanship by who, you know, and I hate that they couldn't find the guy who did that to throw him out of there. You know, but I mean, at the same time,
El Chapo, they couldn't get rid of him.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But, you know, I mean, Osweiler can't. If a laser pointer was causing that issue with him, with you know, he should have thrown 4 interceptions last night, and Raiders defenders were dropping passes both sides of the ball. They're dropping passes all game long. Clearly, that means there's been laser pointers on Osweiler the entire time he's been in the Houston Texan uniform. I said that last night. It's cheap, but you can't just strictly blame a bad performance on that. He's been playing poorly. He played poorly last night. Some coaching blunders by O'Brien cost them the game. And got to give kudos and props to Jack Del Rio, who's doing an incredible job. I love the fact that he went for it on that 4th and 1 that pretty much sealed up the game in the fourth quarter, rather than he could have taken the delay game, tried to draw him off sides, and drop back and punt, and forced Osweiler to try and do something he hadn't been doing all day, which is driving he only had a couple of good drives in that game. But it's so you can't blame the laser pointer on it overall.
I can't say that he deserves no blame, but I do think, I mean, that I have, as an idiot kid, when it says don't shine this in your eye, you're like, oh, well, okay, let's just see what this laser pointer actually does. And you can't see for a second, whether that laser pointer actually got in his eye or not. I mean, there was times where you could see it on his helmet.
Yeah, on his body. Yeah.
And I mean, you're in a foreign country. You're in Mexico City, one of the most dangerous cities on the planet. And do you know whether that's a laser pointer or, it's not a guarantee. It's a gun. Nobody's going to get in there with a gun. Hope not.
Right. No. But
do you honestly know that for sure that that's not going to be a gun if you're in one of the most dangerous cities on the planet? And the answer is no. And it's going to be distracting. Yeah, if the laser pointer goes in your eye, it temporarily blinds you for a second or two. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's going to affect whether you're going to be able to, throw an out route. But to your point, he has not been accurate on anything really this year at all. And you can't, I mean, he can use that as an excuse and whatnot, but it's not like if, Peyton Manning or something like that in the prime of his career is making that excuse or something like that, or Tom Brady this year or something like that. That it's not the same. My thing with the Mexico City thing, this has to be done right. Like I think we've talked about this before, where we were talking about what happened to Mexico City as far as on the being a viable option for an NFL franchise, because that was the talk of the mid 2000s. Like, oh, this is going to happen. A team's going to Mexico City. It's unavoidable. Then it got forgotten for about 10 years. Now it's back. I feel like it's going to be gone for another 10 years after this incident.
I don't think this is going to overshadow they've been showing clips all week on ESPN about how big the fan base is in Mexico City for the Raiders and the Dallas Cowboys, and just football in general, and how it's grown since that game in 2005. And I think this is going to catch a little more traction now than it did 10 years ago, for the simple reason of this. Obviously, it's way more feasible to put a team in Mexico City than it would ever be to put one in London, England.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere felt like a real NFL game yesterday. Whereas I've watched these London games over the last couple of years, and it feels like I'm watching a preseason game in the early August. It doesn't have that feel of an NFL regular season game, where this game actually did. This, it didn't seem, obviously the location looked different on TV, and it obviously the dynamics were completely different. But this game had a true season feel, and I actually felt, I'm like, wow, this could be a thing. We could see a team in Mexico City. Jacksonville is something. Something happens and their lease moves up or whatever. Why not put the Jaguars in Mexico City? Expand two teams and have a expansion franchise in Mexico City. So I think it's a much better idea than London. I would like to personally see the London game scrapped, and let's have two games. Oakland and Dallas have the biggest fan bases. Let's have them take a home game or a road game and go down there every year. I think that'd be a lot more entertaining than watching these teams go across country and play, in London, where I really don't think that's going to be a game, a viable option for expansion.
I don't, the Mexico City, it just, I don't hate, like, I don't hate the idea. I don't know. It has the London, at least. Okay, the first couple times I felt like the crowd was into it, and now I think they're spoiled as far as having like 4 games there every year. Or they're just pissed off that we keep sending the Jaguars over there like 6 times a year.
Right.
But what do you think of this idea? Okay, the reason why I think Goodell, he's been a jackass and an a-hole on a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's kind of on the right curve here. Okay, where you're not getting a lot of, American kids to go out for football anymore, for American football anymore. You don't have that, I guess you pretty much just have, the inner city is pretty much the last strong base you have for getting NFL football type players. Him expanding to these international, a poor country like a poorer country like Mexico, going into Europe where there's people that, have a little bit of a hunger to make some money. Mexico, where you can turn some of these, I guess foreigners is the only word I can think of, but these people from other countries into football players or people interested in playing football. That you're expanding outside of the base that you're losing as far as football. People that are concerned about playing football because of concussions. If you're going to these countries that, and continents that are, they're willing to do whatever to put food on the table. If that means a brain injury or whatever, they're willing to do it. I feel like that, like Goodell. I think that's his skeevy plan. As sad as that sounds, what is your thought on that?
No, I don't know. I agree with that in a little bit. But
do you know what I'm saying though?
Yeah, I get the synopsis.
He's trying to make up the base of. I feel like he's been trying to make up. He knows he's losing a certain group of people that are playing football right now, and he's trying to find either a country or a city or some place to replace those players that he's losing here in the United States.
I don't see it that way exactly. I think the NFL is really just trying to see how far the money grab can go outside of the United States. Obviously, if you can breed more talent overseas, we've seen the influx of talent from overseas in the other 3 leagues. Obviously, the NHL, Major League Baseball, NBA, though they've had tons of superstars from around the world, and we can't say that about the NFL. Maybe down the road we'll see 1 or 2 stars come from another country that doesn't have football traditionally, and something grows out of it. But I don't really think it would take a long time and a lot of other things besides just the NFL to get that rolling. And even when we start talking about the college games going overseas, I don't ever think we're going to see American football ever take off to that kind of level, becoming an international sport. And like I said, it's just the history and tradition of it. It's just starting now. If for that to happen, it would probably take another 150 years, in my opinion, and having groups develop true international football programs like we have the FIBA with basketball, or the International Ice Hockey Federation. Groups like that would have to start popping up for it to really turn into what you're talking about. Having a more of a scouting grounds outside of the North America area.
What do you think's more likely? The NFL becomes the second most popular sport in the United States, Or what do you think happens first? NFL becomes the second most popular sport in the United States, or we have an international star in the NFL. Not, I'm not talking about I'm talking a European star in the NFL.
Uh it's obviously I think I don't think either one is going to really happen. If I had to pick one, I'd say it'd be more likely that a European star emerges. But even that would still be, tough. And the thing is, if there's a European athlete that's good enough to play football in the NFL level, obviously he's going to come over here earlier and play college football because that's the top developing ground. We might have 10 or 20 people we've never heard of that would be excellent in the NFL, but we've never seen them because we don't know what are you basing their talent on. If you got a running back in Germany who, in whatever league they have, and he's destroying everybody. But what real talent is he going up against? It's the same thing we said here for years, with basketball players and even hockey players. You look at, hockey players in Russia and how Russia developed their hockey players. And, it said, no American could ever go over to Russia and play in one of their leagues where all the Russians could come over to the NHL and play. And now that's not the case because you look at the Continental Hockey League, there's a lot of former NHL players from America and Canada playing in that league. So, so I don't think we're going to see either one, but I wouldn't be shocked to see a European star at some point emerge in the NFL within the next maybe 30, 40 years.
Before we get back into what the show is supposed to be about, I do have one more question. With the I don't think it was Ryan. Oh, it was Josh Norman. Josh Norman brought up an interesting point, which is rare for Josh Norman, but he brought up the commissioner should have like a term limit, like the U.S. president or like the president of the United States. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't think. No, I don't agree with that at all. I just believe that the NFL should have another commissioner. I don't think there should be term limits on it. If you're doing your job well, then you should keep. That's a job you should keep. I don't think there should be votes on it. And if there's issues with a commissioner, I think the owners and player representatives should be able to vote that person in or out. Yeah. But I don't think it should be something where it's a term that they have to renew and things of that nature. So I agree with the idea slightly in theory, but I don't believe that. I just believe that if there are conflict issues, that there should be a way to, I guess, impeach a commissioner if the league and the Players Association don't feel comfortable or feel that that person's up to standard with the job.
I feel like the players should have a say in who the commissioner is to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also feel like Adam Silver should be the commissioner of all four major sports.
I agree. He's definitely the best commissioner. It's been around since any of us have been alive, I'd say.
Okay. Well, let's get back to what we're here to talk about, and that's gambling. And okay. Yes. Well, picking games. Okay, college football. Going into kind of the first of, what would you say, like 3 rivalry weekends, because we still have Navy Army at the end of it. And,
sure, yeah.
So kind of 3 rivalry weekends here. We got, in the Big Ten, technically we could end up in a, people are talking about the Big Ten East. The Big Ten West could turn into a 4-way tie, which I don't know how that winds up getting settled. If Minnesota beats Wisconsin and Iowa beats Nebraska, that could turn into a 4-way tie and just a complete cluster F. And then you look at the Big Ten East, Ohio State beats Michigan and Penn State takes care of business. Penn State goes to the Big Ten championship. With the Big Ten being the best conference in America right now, what is it that what are you looking at with these 2, 4, 6 games pretty much that mean something in the Big Ten?
Well, the biggest thing is that where the motivation lies. These players want to win games. We're the ones who are worried about covering the spreads. And even in a matchup as big as Ohio State, Michigan, which is basically a de facto eliminator for the college football playoff. Style points won't mean a thing here, like we've seen the last couple weeks. We've seen Ohio State turn up the gas on some teams lately. We've seen Michigan rout some teams, earlier in the year and kind of slow down a little bit. But style points mean nothing here. These are the games. These wins count more than how you win. So we're going to see some dogfights in those battles. We're going to see some dogfights in a lot of these rivalry battles, which is something to take note of when you're seeing some of these higher spreads. There aren't too many of the high spreads within these. Looking at some of these rivalry matchups, a lot of them are within single digits. Obviously, you've got some big time mismatches like South Carolina, Clemson this year. Clemson a 24-point favorite. Illinois, Northwestern that opened at 14 and moved up now to 16.5. And like once again, looking at situations, for example, Northwestern, a win in that game not only is it big in the rivalry sense, but they also become bowl eligible, where Illinois is just kind of playing out the string at this point. So you have to take that in consideration. Where's the team going? Some of these teams that are going to be bowl eligible, they're already bowl eligible. They won't care, especially if they've lost games before. Looking at like West Virginia, for example, against Iowa State. West Virginia, a 7-point favorite. There's no way they're going to get into the playoff at this point. Do they really care that they're going to go to the Cactus Bowl or maybe the Alamo Bowl? I don't think it matters to them that much. Granted, Iowa State's a bad team, so you also have to take that in consideration with that particular game. Nothing stands out as far as rivalry matchups, as far as betting on or against. I'm on a couple of them this week, but not because of the rivalry matchup. There are legitimate implications outside of that I feel warrant putting a wager on those particular clubs. Well,
and I mean, what constitutes a rivalry anymore? I mean, you throw just because Nebraska and Iowa are border each other doesn't mean it's a rivalry. And these fans here want to turn it into a rivalry, and it's just I would rather Nebraska-Wisconsin be the last game. Yeah, and everybody wanted that originally. When Nebraska went into the Big Ten, it was like, oh, we'll get to play Iowa, but I want a real rivalry to be Wisconsin. And that's actually kind of turned into a little bit of a rivalry, only between the fans, but, there's been some bad blood, between the teams.
Sure, and it has, but, I mean, obviously Minnesota-Wisconsin is a gigantic rivalry up here. The Paul Bunyan's axe, that's a big thing. And even though Minnesota has a deep-hated rivalry with Iowa as well, which ironically enough is a game, we don't see that game played late in the year often. I think it was right before the addition of Nebraska and Rutgers the last time that Minnesota-Iowa played the final game of the regular season. So you kind of man-making rivalries. At some point, Maryland-Rutgers is another one that's kind of man-made because of the conference matchups and whatnot. But over time, those will turn into rivalries. I mean, you look at Penn State, Michigan State, teams that were Penn State, for example, they weren't even in the Big Ten for the longest time, and they've now grown to have rivalries with Michigan State, Michigan, outside of the area, Maryland. That's another one. Even Rutgers, because that's they fight every year for recruiting territory. So that's another thing. It's not so much just historical team versus team matchups, but looking at Nebraska, Iowa, that's a recruiting battle. Maryland, Rutgers, same deal. Syracuse, Pittsburgh, conference battle, but a lot of those rivalries also involve recruiting as well.
Looking at, first off, I had a big hit, which I very rarely have. And, we've talked about this for 2 years.
Yep.
Last year we talked about it, and you told me to stay away because it was just, we looked at the schedule. We couldn't find a second win. This year we got it. We should have, I got it. But, should have had it earlier in the season against TCU. Yep. And Kansas beating Rhode Island, one of the greatest teams ever assembled. And then a defeat of Texas, which Kansas had not beaten Texas since Adolf Hitler was Time's Man of the Year in 1938.
Yeah.
That's how long it has been since, and I can't believe that Adolf Hitler was a person of the year for Time magazine. But that tells you how long ago. In 1938, Kansas beat Texas. But could I get a pat on the back for sticking with his bet for a second straight year?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I give you tremendous props for sticking through and believing you believed in the numbers. You believed there was going to be a second win at some point. You didn't know how it would happen, and give credit to this Kansas team. We did say it, a few weeks ago. They are a lot better than they have been in the last several years. They struggle with recruiting. The top players in Kansas go to Kansas State or they go to one of the Texas schools. So they get the short end of the stick there. So they struggle, but they've done a really good job of trying to turn things around with that program, and they were able to hang around and beat a Texas team that's in a state of disarray. And Charlie Strong, he's pretty much, we're hearing he is gone. He might not be gone just yet. It seems to be a foregone conclusion that he will not be coaching this team come August or September of 2017. So, and that makes for an interesting scenario that we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But, Kansas, will they ever become a power in the Big 12 like they are in basketball? No. But could they get back to being at least a respectable team and maybe put up some 6-6 records, maybe go to a bowl game every once in a while? Yes, I think if they stay the course and develop an identity, I think they're slowly starting to develop an identity offensively. They want to try and play the fast up-tempo style that the conference is well known for at this point. Try and maybe start poaching some players from other regions and bringing them into that style and scheme of play. But props to Kansas for getting the second win. The fans were going nuts. They tore down the goalposts. Yeah. And doubling their win total, now in each of the last couple of years. And who knows? Maybe now we'll see a 2.5 open up for that number come this summer, or maybe
I don't know. I hope if it's 1.5 again, I'm doing it again. 2.5, that's pushing it.
And that's the thing. We see how the recruits come in. There could be some value, one way or the other. And the fact that you've started a trend now. You've been watching this team the last couple of years as far as the win total. This might be a team you want to start looking at win totals on for the next 2 or 3 years, just because you've seen their progression or regression. That's the key point of betting win totals. If you follow one program's progression or regression enough, you can make a quality guesstimate and wager on that team.
I said it was going to be Iowa State, and as soon as that didn't happen, I checked out on Kansas' season completely. And TCU, I watched that till the bitter end, and that was terrible. But I will say this, okay? It says something. I don't advocate what these coaches did, because as a coach myself, I try to I'm pretty laid back. But you look at places like Kansas, Texas Tech, South Florida. They got rid of Leach, Mangino, and Jim Leavitt because of Leavitt, I think, punched a kid in the chest, which not good. You look at Leach, who what did he do? He locked Craig James's kid in a shed because he had a concussion, which I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. And for a concussion at least. And then Mangino, I believe, also punched a kid in the chest.
Yeah.
But have any of these three programs done anything since those three guys left? I'm not advocating violence between coaches and players or stupidity between coaches and players, but none of these three programs have been any good since those three coaches left. It's obviously those guys knew what they were doing, and Leach has it going at Washington State. So I think when you have a good thing going, if you're a program, I'm not saying cover stuff up because we saw what happened with Penn State.
Yeah.
But I would say, were things really that bad at Texas Tech where you should get rid of Leach? Leach would never have left for anything better than Texas Tech. He would still be there today if they hadn't overreacted to that whole Craig James thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's odd. I don't know. You programs. Obviously things take a different direction, and it's not always about wins and losses. Like I said, if there's other things going on behind the scenes we might not know about right away, then we see these changes being made. But we haven't seen anything from these programs, and that happens. There's a revolving door within college football. We see teams that go up and down the pendulum. The teams with the deepest pockets, the Alabamas, Michigans, Ohio States of the world, they're always going to be on top because they're always going to spend the money. But the money may not always be there for a program like
Texas spends all the money, and they're never.
Yeah, Texas is an anomaly now, but we've seen them be prominent and relevant for so long, and now they're going through their deep spell. We saw this with Kansas State in the years where Bill Snyder wasn't coaching in Manhattan, where they took it down. So it happens to all Northern Illinois right now. Even though Rod Carey is a product of the coaching tree we've seen from Jerry Kill, even going back to I'm drawing a blank. Joe Novak. But now it seems that Carey is a little too disconnected. I believe he's a coach that should be on the chopping block after this game this weekend. And a program like Northern Illinois, who you look at them, the most wins they've had in the last 7-8 years, they're right up there with Oregon and Michigan State and Alabama of the world. They've been one of the best programs in the nation. But they are taking a downturn, and they want to keep that momentum or keep moving forward. I feel like they're a program, and I've advocated them moving to the Big 12 because they're stagnant. You find programs become stagnant within certain conferences. That's why we see the conference movements. We see coaching philosophies change, strategies change. Your program becomes stagnant. Who wants to go see your team win 8-4 every year and go, same meaningless bowl game? At some point, if you bring in that kind of talent, 8-4 needs to become 9-3, 10-2, hopefully 11-1 or 12-0. So you have to keep going up. If you're not at that level, you have to keep reaching for it. And I think that's what we're seeing programs do year after year with the coaching changes that go around constantly.
All righty. Well, let's get into our best bets for the week. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. I'm going to go with my good bet. I'm going to go Boise State to cover a 9.5-point spread over Air Force. Boise, ever since that Wyoming law, that Boise has not been a world beater, but I feel like because of their past, that had they not lost to Wyoming, they'd be in the hunt for maybe a top 4. They'd probably be in the top, maybe not going to the top, college football playoff, but maybe in the top 7, top 8, where it's like, okay, if somebody has 2 losses, do we really keep an undefeated Boise out?
Right.
And I feel Boise still wants to get a New Year's 6 game. Don't know if that's entirely possible, but I think
they need Western Michigan to lose for that to happen.
Yep. Which I still think is possible because the MAC is historic for having a really good team losing in the MAC championship.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go Boise to win this by at least 10 at Air Force. Usually like Air Force, but Boise wins this. What's your good bet for the week?
My good bet, we're going to the early Thanksgiving game on Thursday. Detroit Lions against the Minnesota Vikings. Like I said, huge game. Detroit with the lead in the NFC. They're moving, at a high pace, while Minnesota's just completely falling off the rails. Even though they beat a really weak Arizona team last week to finally snap their losing streak, they just still look lost on offense. Their defense and special teams that bailed them out in that ball game. The big kick return to open the second half by Cordero Patterson, the interception for a touchdown by Xavier Rhodes. So you look at Detroit, this number has come down significantly. It was open at 3, so now you see it's a 2.5. Actually see a couple of 2s around in offshore as well. I think the Lions are going to cover this game here. I think they're going to win outright, win by at least a couple of touchdowns. I think the crowd's going to be fired up. They know how big of a game this is. It's the biggest. When's the last time we could say the Lions are in first place at Thanksgiving? So The guys know what's at stake here. Big national TV audience. I think the Lions come out here and get a win against this Vikings team that's really still struggling on both sides of the ball at times.
My better bet is South Carolina to cover a 24-point spread against Clemson. Keep in mind, I placed a sizable bet that did not pay off with South Carolina. They had a 4.5 win total, and I bet the under. That did not go well. South Carolina has played well in a lot of games. Clemson has played a lot of close games against a lot of bad teams. And I think, with the rivalry game, I'm going to take South Carolina to cover 24-point spread, even at Clemson. What is your better bet for this week?
My better bet, it's a late Saturday game going out to the Big Island, Hawaii. They're hosting University of Massachusetts, and this is a game that really means nothing to any other program. I mean, look at not this is going bowling. Really, yeah. I mean, these are the games that are strictly made for wagering. I mean, unless you're a true fan of one of these programs, this game you could care less about it. But I think there's a great spot here, Hawaii. We've seen some money come in on UMass, and I'm not really sure why. That's a really bad team that's been on a horrible traveling schedule. They're you look at the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, they were in Alabama playing against Troy. They get blown out in that game, 52-31. Then they go cross country, play BYU. They get dismantled in that game, lose 51-9. Now they're going even into a different time zone in Hawaii. And they went from playing in some pretty crappy weather to now being in paradise. I think Hawaii, this is one of their last games of the year. I think they're going to be a little more fired up. They're a team that's been road beaten all year. You look at they started the year in Australia and they bounced around all over the country as well. Hawaii got a big
Hawaii's
win
like the opposite of UMass, where the beginning of their season was completely aft.
Yeah.
Compared to UMass, where the end of the year is completely aft as far as travel goes by their athletic directors.
And the thing too is that they're both doing it for the same reasons. They need money for their programs. Massachusetts, being dropping out of the MAC, they're going to be an independent. So Hawaii laying 7.5, I think that's well within reason to wager on. I think they should be able to take care of business in this game. I can see where UMass is kind of going to be laid back, not really, especially if they started looking gas in the second half. I think the Rainbow Warriors will be able to step on the gas and be able to get a win and a cover here.
I'm torn on my best bet, which is the dumbest thing as dumb as it sounds. But I'm torn between the New England 8 points against the Jets and the 7.5 with Buffalo and Jacksonville. I'm leaning towards taking Jacksonville to cover 7.5. I know Jacksonville has been absolutely terrible and just a absolute dumpster fire, but I don't feel like Buffalo. This feels like a time for Rex Ryan to fold. I'm going to go best bet. Jacksonville covers the 7.5 point spread at Buffalo. This is a time for a Rex Ryan coach team to lose focus, have a bad game, and they still win, but Jacksonville covers the 7.5 points. Just a little too big of a margin for a Rex Ryan team for my liking. What is your best bet?
Well, interesting thing there too with those two you talked about. You could easily throw that into a teaser. In my opinion, I think that would be probably be the best way to play both of those. Tease down the Patriots and tease up Jacksonville and move that to it within a 13, 14 point spread. So that might be a way to look at wagering both of those games as you mentioned. But my best bet, we're gonna go to, and this is actually my clients got the selection today. This is a Friday afternoon game. And it's the Texas Longhorns. They're laying 2.5, some spots 3, with some heavy juice on that number against TCU. We saw how bad they played last week. We've seen how bad they played all year. Charlie Strong is going to be done. But the players were upset when they first heard about the fact that he's going to be fired. That's usually the case with any coach.
Good, so who cares?
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. You have these spots where team was embarrassed. They lost to one of the doormats of the entire college football world, and now they're playing a primetime game against the in-state rival, more than likely the coach's last game. And you look at the matchup of Deontay Foreman, running back. He only needs 137 more yards to reach the 2,000 yards in the season. The guy who we hardly heard the name as much as we should have as far as Heisman talks goes. TCU's rushing defense is horrible. They allowed 334 yards last week. They've allowed, I think, around 170 yards almost per game on the ground. I think the Longhorns will be fired up. They'll be focused. And I have no problem laying the 2.5 here. I think Texas wins this thing by at least a touchdown. So Longhorns are my best bet of the week.
Yeah, I like I think Texas is playing with fire if they fire Charlie Strong. I don't think Charlie Strong struggled in his first couple of years against Louisville, and then he laid he had a good year with really good year with Teddy Bridgewater, and he laid kind of a good foundation for Petrino to come in. Maybe you wait a couple of years, and if you're Texas, Texas doesn't have the highest character in the United States. Maybe you could open up the gates for a Bobby Petrino to come in after a couple more years with Charlie Strong to, set up shop there. I think Texas. I like Charlie Strong. I think he's a very good coach. Probably just not the right coach for Texas.
Right, I get you on that.
It really is there. Texas has won one championship that wasn't the Jiffy Lube national title in the last 50 years. So who gives a crap about Texas? But all right, before we get out of here, Alex, do you want to tell everybody where we can find you on Twitter, the internet, all that good stuff? Yeah,
find me on Twitter at AXSmithSports. Go to my website, axsmithsports.com. I've got a package deal right now. You can get all of my plays this weekend, all the way, everything through the rest of the 2016 calendar year, and that also includes all of the bowl games for just $369. It's a tremendous deal. I've been hitting on a hot run tonight in college basketball, college and pro basketball right now. I'm on a 12-4 run. Cashed another winner just barely tonight with the over in Minnesota and Arkansas. So hoops have been doing well. Football's been doing pretty good. 5 of the last 6 winners in the NFL. Get on board right now at axsmithsports.com.
All righty. And on that note, you can catch my show again here next Tuesday. And you can catch the Bob Sullivan Show. And then you can catch the box seats here again next Tuesday as we talk more NFL, preview a little bit more of the college football playoff and conference title games coming up next week. And that'll do it for this episode of the box seats here on LateNightSportsRadio.com. Have a good night. See you next week.